Hello everyone, this is Nathan and I'm reporting live from Concrete Plant Park where I am beside the Foodway. We're gonna just hang on it for a minute since we're going live, see who's able to join us today. Today we're gonna be talking about going water-wise, or being water-wise. So what does that even mean? So thinking, how can we be water efficient in our gardens? How do we build gardens and landscapes that are water efficient, and think about water conservation and redirecting water to use in times when we need it. So today we're going to be thinking about water-wise gardening. Thanks for joining me. I'm here at Concrete Plant Park, right beside the Foodway. Let's see if you can see the towers that are pretty famous. These are our icon here at the park. Anyone that's been to Concrete will know that it's a very loud park. Over here behind me is Westchester Avenue. The 6 train is currently going around me. So it's going to be quite loud. Feel free to comment and say if speak up if I'm being too quiet. But like I said, I'm excited to be with you today and to be talking a bit about water-wise gardening. And for me, water-wise gardening just means thinking about a landscape, building a landscape that is water resilient, which means that in times of drought or of drier temperatures, drier conditions, there are sources of water that plants can find. And we'll talk about those different ways, maybe rain gardens, maybe we're harvesting rainwater and rain barrels. But we're over here at the Foodway because this site itself is a piece of green infrastructure. So today we're going to talk a bit about green infrastructure and how that aids in storing water and re-releasing it into our groundwater in a sustainable way. So that's part of water-wise gardening. That's part of water efficiency. So again, I'm excited to be with you all. My name's Nathan. I'm with Bronx River Alliance and New York City Parks, and I'm here at Concrete Plant Park in the South Bronx, the boogie down. And I'm standing in front of the Foodway, New York City's only series of public edible gardens inside of a park where you can actually forage. So that's pretty cool on its own. Here we are exploring what the Foodway can be. So I'm gonna try to share the screen. Flip it so you can see what I'm looking at. So over here is Westchester Avenue. Hello from Scotland. So if you look this way, you can find Westchester Avenue. We are in the South Bronx. That's Cass Gilbert train station, an old Amtrak train station that we are hoping one day to revive. But behind that is the 6 train from MTA. And right down here is our Foodway. And the Foodway is New York City Park's series of public edible gardens, first of its kind. It's full of forageable foods. Here we're looking at some bergamot, definitely a water-wise crop. We love bergamot. It's also known as Monarda. This is Monarda fistulosa, if you really want to break it down. I'm going to try to break out some Latin, use my Latin names. But that's what this crop is. It's a host plant. As you can see, we got some praying mantis nests, or these are casings. So these are seed, not seeds anymore. They're little baby praying mantis inside. Those will be hatching anytime. But I'm going to just kind of dive into things, talk about specifically what water-wise gardening means to me. I would love for you guys to chime in and acknowledge what water-wise gardening means to you. John, I hope you can come out to the Foodway at some point soon. But for me, water-wise gardening is always site-specific. That's first. So when we're thinking about building a efficient garden, I always think of the term permaculture, which is permanent agriculture. It's thinking about perennials and natives that exist and can be resilient and survive on their own, right? So that's a big piece of it. So we'll talk a lot about plant selection, but I think first is site, because you got to know what you're dealing with before you pick out the plants. And then after we talk about plant selection, think about ways to water, maybe rainwater harvesting, sub-irrigation planning. I'm all about it. Infinity gardens, all about it. And talk about all those different things as I walk through the park. Definitely, it's all about using less water and using what's happening, right? Like natural rainfall. So if it is a wet region, like how do you plant things that are wet loving? How do you work in an arid region with arid crops? All those difficulties or challenges for some. especially for those that are nomadic or tend to move for whatever reason. So I want to first just talk about site, right? So we are here. I'm going to flip the camera around. We are here at Concrete Plant Park in urban space. This was reclaimed by community members and ultimately the Parks Department and the Bronx River Alliance, as it is adjacent to the Bronx River, and we are the stewards of this Bronx River. So here in the park, we have this foodway. A foodway is really just a well-designed landscape. In this situation, it's an edible landscape, but it mimics nature. So it's a lot about biomimicry. So here at the foodway, we have a ground cover. We have our herbaceous layer. That's what the ground cover. Herbaceous layer, things like the bergamot here. We have the next height, or the next tier, which you're going to find in a forest. So part of permaculture and part of agroecology and the foodway, I'm just throwing out all these terms, is having different tiers. So we have an herbaceous layer. We have a shrubby layer. These are sweet fern. And we also have over here some northern bayberry. So you're starting to see a shrubby layer. And then in the back, we're not seeing it quite yet, but back here there are actually some chestnuts. So those are chestnut trees. Those can get very large, about 100 feet. And so we're thinking about all these different levels. So here in this site, this urban site, we brought in clean soil. So we know the soil, what it actually is made out of. So we know it's not clay. We had the luxury of building the soil. So this is a sandy loam. So sandy loam holds on to moisture pretty well. It also allows moisture to go through. So we know that during heavy rain events, water is going to kind of go through. So we know that soil. We know what we want plant-wise, but we also know we're on a slope. So as I'm standing uphill, we can see that everything's sloping down, and what that means is water will travel that way. What's cool about the design of the foodway is actually we thought about this water-wise gardening technique and actually have a pipe hidden under the ground here, and it fills with water during heavy rain events, and then during drier events, it releases from that perforated pipe, and plants are able to access that water. And that's a form of sub-irrigation on a large scale. A lot of people know sub-irrigation on small scale, but this site is man-made, right? We were able to manipulate it and really design it, and that's this site. Now, other sites we can think of often are community gardens, right? That's a big one. If we're thinking about water-wise gardens and community gardens, so where are the hills? I think slopes is the big thing you want to be thinking about. Where is your actual water source? Are you getting it from a tap? Are you getting it from like a little pond? Are you getting it from, where's your water source? That's really important to think about in your space. So for us, we have actually subsequent or extra watering capabilities that are hidden behind the actual infrastructure. Hey, Carlo. So we're having fun here at the Foodway. We're talking water-wise gardens. I want you guys to share with me what your thoughts are about water-wise gardening. We're over here talking about site specifics. So what does a water-wise site look like? For us at the Foodway, it looks like a permaculture site. A permaculture site is all about natives. It's all about perennials, things that come back every year and are native to this region. That means that they're resilient during heavy rainfall events, which is natural, or maybe not so natural with climate change, but regardless, they are resilient. And during drier seasons, which they are used to, they're able to handle those seasons, or those times, right? So throw your questions out here. We're talking water-wise gardening. Yeah, we need to go out to Drew Garden. But here's a great example. So as I think about site and we think about plants and we think about gardens, we're starting at like a horticultural site here in the upper portion of the Foodway. So up here, this northern section of the Foodway, this space is all about perennial natives, things that might not be so familiar to you, but are totally edible and can be used in multiple ways. So over here, I just replanted this area and created a new pathway because people were using this as a shortcut. So instead of competing, I changed the design a bit. And here we have a nice grouping of some edible plants. We've got catmint, which is a very drought tolerant mint. It's also known as nepeta. Catmint's really great. You can make a tea from it. It's known to help with, I've heard, depression, but digestion's the big thing that mint's really good for. It's drought tolerant, and you can tell if something is drought tolerant. I learned this from one of my mentors by looking at the leaf. And this leaf you can tell is silvery or gray. And silvery and gray leaves typically indicate that it is drought tolerant. So we're checking out a drought tolerant plant here. Beside it, we are checking out some Coreopsis. Now I know from researching Coreopsis that Coreopsis is pretty drought tolerant. It's native to the prairies and more Central America. But this variety is a hybrid, so I do know it has been hybridized to be quite resilient on its own. And what's great about this one, I know there are medicinal benefits. I also know you can use it as a coffee substitute. I know specifically tick seed Coreopsis is known for that. So check that out. But this is another resilient plant. And then what's my last one over here? We got a Ajuga. There it is. She's a beauty. I love Ajuga. So Ajuga is really great. It has edible blue flowers that come up in spring. It's water loving, but it's also really able to handle dry periods. So that versatility is all about water-wise gardens. So I would say this is like actually a pretty good idea of like a water-wise garden, this coupling. And you can notice that everything's grown really dense, right? You see that the Ajuga is in close distance to the catmint, close distance, just everything is in close distance to one another. You will see that I planted that catmint quite close to everything else. Check out how big these guys will get. They're just going to swallow the other ones. But while these new plants are starting to get larger, this is a more mature plant. The importance of them shading out the ground is great, because if it shades out the ground, it holds in moisture. So that takes me kind of to the next part of thinking about the way you might amend the soil using wood chips, right? So in this situation, you can see that I amended with heavy wood chips because I know this path is going to be traversed by feet, right? This is going to be a path that people are going to go, kids are going to run down. I want some durable wood chips that can be kicked around. And then I continued those wood chips because people might stray off the path a bit over here, which gives them a little extra breathing room, which is really good. It also has more ability to hold moisture in the long term, possibly because the wood chips could absorb water like a sponge. So that's something to think about, I think, in this situation. Here's another really great plant of a drought tolerant plant. This is lamb's ear. So lamb's ear is famous for being drought tolerant. And like I said earlier, with the gray silvery leaves, you can see here that they are gray and silver, very soft. Kids love these. This is antimicrobial, which is really great. If you ever have a cut, you can put this right on your cut. Keeps it clean. It's really, really soft. It's great for folks who kind of fidget in class. Like I remember we had a tour with some students here. We gave them some leaves. These were some special needs folks, but I think regardless of that group or other school groups, people need sometimes a little bit of a distraction in order to focus, as crazy as that sounds. Lamb's ear is a great one for that. This is the center of our foodway. So this section here is actually where we're going to find our pollinators. So this is a really great example of talking about how we cluster things, get things very close. You can see here that there's a lot of open soil. This is actually very bad. We always want to make sure that the soil is covered with wood chips. I'm not doing the best job in doing that. I could use some help out here, but we are spreading it. We are getting these jobs done for sure. But the importance of wood chips, like I said, is really to keep the soil covered. Wood chips have a water holding capacity, which is really great, so they can hold water. But wood chips are actually more important for keeping the soil moist and keeping the bacteria alive. So bacteria, fungi, and root zone alive. And that's really important because the more bacteria and the more life there is in soil, the more life there is in soil, that is actually increasing the capacity to hold water as well as hold air, because those microbes are living and breathing just like we are living and breathing, and that's giving capacity to those structured spaces that they're building under the soil. It's like really fascinating how that is actually one of the most key parts to carbon sequestering, but also holding water and holding nutrients, is really healthy soil. So I think it's really important if you're organic gardening. No tillage is a big thing. The more you till, we can remember this from the period when we had the Dust Bowl. Tillage can be really tough, so there's other ways to get around tillage, and we won't be talking about that today, but we'll be talking about it other times. If you're eager to learn, we can talk about it sooner. But we are out here at the Foodway. I'm glad y'all were able to make it with me. We are here in the middle, and I started to tell you guys that this is our pollinator section. So you can see tons of chickweed, just a runaway spring ephemeral. But you're seeing here some anise hyssop that has shown up. Among the anise hyssop, you're gonna actually see some black-eyed Susan. That's what this leaf is. This is another drought-tolerant crop. You can feel the hairs. The hairs indicate that it's drought-tolerant. Wood chips help with weeds, yeah. So thanks, Laura, for mentioning that. I talk a lot about how wood chips are really good for holding moisture and keeping soil alive. But yeah, that's another thing, is it actually shades out or competes with the weeds, right? Thank you for saying that. So in this meadow, we've got all these different varieties. So once I pull out the mugwort and the chickweed, so this is chickweed, all this stuff, and mugwort is this frilly stuff. Once I pull that out from the section that is covered in it, those are pretty aggressive crops. We're gonna have a lot of space, and I'm gonna try to fill in with other crops so that we're always keeping a dense space, using companion plants, plants that do well with each other, and planting resilient, drought-tolerant plants, right? So y'all with me here? I hope I'm not just kind of droning on. I can totally talk plants for hours. And it's really, as gray as it is outside, it's actually really nice. And so I hope you're able to kind of virtually be here with me, enjoying this space. Here at the Foodway, we're lucky to have a berry walk. And so I'm gonna take you through there. These are service berries that have just bloomed, and we're checking out some chokeberries down here that are going to be opening up and blooming any day now. They're so pretty. They're like a nice blush. So there's some chives. Chives are really great. They spring up in, this time of year in the spring, have beautiful edible flowers. But down this path is really where the berry walk begins. In this circle, you'll find more chives. And then there's tons of mint. So if you're a mint lover, come on down. This reddish black green is all some chocolate mint. And over here, some creeping thyme, which is super drought tolerant. So I would say herbs are really drought tolerant. If you ever want an edible landscape, put tons of creeping thyme, put tons of mint, both of which are super aggressive, but also super drought tolerant. And I know what everyone's thinking. It's pretty crazy to plant mint outdoors because it's going to be runaway. That is totally valid. We do a lot of management here, and we encourage people to take a lot of cuttings. But in a way, I'd rather have that than mugwort. I'm not sure. It's tricky, right? Is it possible for a non-green thumb garden to request a wood chip dump from parks? When I used to run a community garden, I used to work directly with arborists because they need to pay to get rid of their wood chips. So I used to become friends with arborists. I would literally flag them down, be like, oh my gosh, hey. So that's a way. Parks, I know, that's tricky. I would talk to Partnership for Parks. That feels like a good path. Green Thumb might have a better answer. Sounds here like Laura has a solution. There's a project near here that collects Christmas trees and local... Yeah, that's great. Do all mints invade, Ira? Yes, most mints invade. I would say some mints that are a little slower on the invasion or like the aggressive route. Our mountain mint hasn't completely taken over the area. It's been pretty slow over the past 4 years. But yeah, it's pretty aggressive, right? Back to the berry walk. So we're thinking about edible crops, right? We're thinking about a food forest. So here we have blueberries, which is a shrub. These are blueberry bushes scattered among the Foodway. So they're below our shadberry, serviceberry. There's like 5 names for this beautiful shrub that produces delicious blueberry-like fruit. But remember that whole permaculture mindset where you've got a canopy tree back there. You've got our chestnut tree, which grow 100 feet. You've got these guys, which grow about 20. Below them, you've got shrubs, which grow about 4 or 5 feet. And then below that, you've got ground cover. You've got things like dandelions, which are edible. You've got mugwort, which is edible. You've got tons of this plantain. Chickweed's actually edible. So, I mean, a lot of these ground covers are wild, and I frequently have an internal struggle with myself about, Nathan, if we're thinking water-wise gardening, shouldn't we be leaving some of these like weeds, or shouldn't we like adding just adding more mulch? Or it's like complicated. I'm really selectively pulling out my weeds, thinking about what people in the community are foraging which weeds, and then I'm leaving, dandelion, because you can do a mass harvest of the root if it's really problematic. I think that's something we could do, and we could dry it out and give away dandelion root. But I think, this is an area that doesn't have a lot of plants between the blueberries, which are the red, the raspberries, which are these light green. So we're trying to plant stuff now in between. So we're trying out some creeping thyme. You'll notice that there's some chamomile growing over here, and here's some of that thyme. These guys are thyme. So we're really thinking about layering and thinking about water-wise gardening. What are your water-wise concerns? I think in a bit I'm going to show you an area where we're going to build a rainwater harvesting system at some point, and I can kind of do the best I can answering any questions you might have. Plant selection, I always think natives. I always think, what are things I can eat? Because I think you should shower yourself with tons of flowers, but also things that can feed you and offer medicine, so that if you're in a pinch, you can get better. But some of my favorite drought-tolerant plants are plants that I would put inside of a rain garden. If I were to build one, let's say, would be like echinacea. I would put black-eyed Susans. I would put maybe even some of this sedge. Some of these sedges. Sedges are grasses. So I'm here at the Foodway, and these are some sedges at the southern section of the northern part of the Foodway, near this rain garden. So this is a great example of some like wetland plants. So these are really water-loving specific plants. Sedge is a type of grass, super resilient. Over here, there's a peppering of kind of like irises and some other edibles. Back here we have fruit. So we've got roses, which produce rose hips that we can harvest, and the flowers are edible. Back here we also have a medley of stuff, including elderberry. These are apple trees back here. We have goji berry over here. There's a small goji. These are some more blueberries around the perimeter. So we really thought about the way this was designed and being water-loving crops, because this area does flood, and if we dig down below the rocks, we can actually find some water still that's being retained. Because like I said, this system here is green infrastructure. So I mentioned earlier that this side actually has a pipe that runs down and holds water in a perforated pipe and releases it during dry periods. And then this dry riverbed, which is now covered in chickweed, this dry riverbed actually is a conduit for extra water to flow down. So it comes down here into this section. So this is straight up a way of harvesting rainwater, a rain garden or a bioswale. Very similar pieces of infrastructure. And then even one step further, agroecology or a permaculture system is another way to think about green infrastructure and water-wise gardening. These are a lot of the same, different words, same meaning, So agroecology is really the idea of having agriculture, building agriculture that is based on an ecological system. So it mimics nature. And then, So I realized this whole entire time the messages were scrolling and I wasn't even seeing them. So what questions do we got over here? Oh my gosh, so many great responses here. I heard mint. I'm glad that tip on the arborist works really well. Basil's really good. See you guys, how are you? Seeing our fishermen in the park. Lemon balm is always really great. It grows pretty fast though. I know I had an experience with lemon balm. My parents' whole front yard is lemon balm, which is great when you mow the lawn, but it's the suburbs, they own their own property. But yes, mugwort and chickweed, Susanna, definitely a ground cover. Anyway, I'm gonna let this be. It looks like folks don't have any dying questions. And let's continue on. Yeah, so the 6 train is right behind me. So if we look right over here, this is the Roaring Six, as Nilka Martel says, and you can just get off on Whitlock, and this is Concrete Plant Park. Now, I do want to remind people we are in quarantine or self-isolating. I do have a mask that I wear. I keep minimum 6 feet, but really more than that from folks. So please use caution coming out. We are being mindful and are listening to our mayor, and Bronx River Alliance is following those guidelines. So just please be safe. I want to point out something that I worked on last year with the HOPE program. They're a group down here in the South Bronx working on green infrastructure. We have a couple pieces of green infrastructure that focuses on water-wise gardening that I'd love to show you. So we got right here a berm. So many people may not know what a berm is. A berm is literally pile of soil that's man-made and you plant it really with plantings, typically trees and other things. It's usually for a privacy screen. Sometimes it's also to mitigate or help disperse water. In this situation, our rain garden was overflowing, so we had extra water leaking through, which was designed, to do. It was leaking through right here. And essentially we built this berm to help take in water. So these are water-loving plants. They're actually really drought-tolerant and resilient grasses. So this is native plant grasses. Really good for birds. This is bird habitat. And so this was built with the HOPE program last year and some of their students. And so what it does is it holds water, absorbs it, and the plants just absorb it. Now we do still see that some leaks through in these little streams, but it's not nearly as much as we had before. So I'm seeing some questions. Okay, so best way to harvest rainwater from a roof. So I'm going to show you where I want to build a rainwater system in a bit, and I can show you kind of like how to do it. I like the 55-gallon barrel system because it's really easy, it's really accessible. You can always find, at least where I live, I can always find some things thrown into a vacant lot that I can maybe rehab. I'm pretty DIY as a person, so I really think about that kind of stuff. I also really think it's pretty inexpensive to find a 55-gallon barrel. So that's the one, that's the main method that I think of. You can also redirect rainwater into a swale where you're growing food. So you can actually build kind of a French gutter system, which is really just where you like channel rocks in a gully or like a dugout section that redirects the water to things like plants. So you could try that if you're working in a kind of in the ground permaculture situation. But I'll kind of talk about how I would build a system and point out using a structure that we built here in the park. Here at the park, Molly, we do water. We do have to water because climate change is real, and the past couple of years it has been really wacky weather, and so and so we didn't have rain for weeks. So we actually dipped into the water main, and we're able to water manually. And so I want to talk a bit about how we water here. But while I'm walking past it, I want to just show a green roof real fast. So for those that are just trying to absorb water, but not necessarily they just want a passive, they don't really want to take care of much, So over here, we have a green roof. This metal thing, you can't see much of it because I'm clearly not on top of a ladder, but up here, the HOPE program and their students helped me, or really did this job, out here in the park and building a green roof. On top are a bunch of native plants that are really resilient in both rain events, so like love water, and drought tolerance, so those plants that can really handle dry periods. So that's a pretty cool piece. We're building some signage that'll be placed out here in the future, so y'all can follow a little closer. So I'm gonna walk this way. We're here at Concrete Plant Park, and I'm walking towards the waterfront. So that's where we came from before. That's Westchester Avenue over there. That would be Bronx River. And over here is Edgewater, and that is the 6 train. So we're gonna walk this way. There goes the robin. So over here, I just want to point out while we're walking by, this is a trash boom. I know we featured this on our story a few weeks ago on our Instagram, but this is a trash boom. I actually saw DEP coming in earlier with their boat, which essentially just made sure or checked in to check in on the boom to see how much trash was sitting there. They'll come back later with the correct boat and actually remove the trash. So we see that maybe 3 to 4 times a week. Over here is where our fishermen are. Those are the 2 folks. The 2 folks we saw earlier. And Carla's over here. So this is the southern end of the park. And over here, you'll see some work is actually being done. Maybe we should talk about that for a second. But this is part of the DOT Sheridan work that's been going on. It's part of the construction continues over here where our meadow is tied off. They're not actually building in the meadow. They're accessing land on the opposite side. So what they're doing is they're building a ramp to assist traffic from Edgewater over the Bruckner. And so we did lose some trees over here, but don't worry, we are getting more trees. Do not fear. And they're actually going to be building a tunnel right through here for a greenway. So we're going to have an extension of a greenway that's going to come from over here over there. So this is really exciting. And we'll see what it looks like come like 2 years, I think. But this is the system. I just want to show you real fast. So this is the Southern Demonstration Garden. This is an area we've been growing kind of cooperatively down here. Anyone is welcome to plant seeds and things like that. But I will say they may be taken, like the food may be taken. And that's kind of the point. This is an open source food program. So we're growing food out here. Anyone can harvest. We use it for cooking demonstrations. We do a lot of things. But pretty cool site. Anyway, so this is a pretty cool compost system that is in the process of being built. Before the lockdown or coronavirus, we were waiting on some solar panels that were going to go on the top because this unit for this compost system will actually be passively aerated. So inside you'll see grooves where pipes will go and air will be blown below the compost, which will help speed up the process, which is pretty exciting. So that's awesome. But behind here, this is what Green Thumb was originally sponsoring a rainwater harvesting workshop where we collectively would build a rainwater harvesting system for this area right back here. So it was a bummer when all these changes in our community took place and funding disappeared and things like that. But it's exciting to have this virtual opportunity. So I'm glad y'all are with me. And this is really what we were going to do. So I'm excited to kind of talk about my idea. And for those that were interested, we were going to stack, about 6 to 7 55-gallon barrels back here. We were going to include a rain gutter system up here to collect rainwater off this route. This is an asphalt route, so let's talk about that in a second. And definitely, Eric, definitely signage, ground rules. We could use support in this effort. More to come. But the rain barrel system would just be set up right here, collect rainwater, and then folks could passively water their gardens. They could come and caretake for the tomatoes they planted. So we'll work on that collectively. This is brand new. We're so lucky to have this opportunity, and I'm excited to be sharing this with you right now and talking with you. But I think this is a really great moment to talk about how we can harvest rainwater as a community with systems or with units like this, small sheds. This is a great example of what a shed could look like, things like that, right? So I think some things I would like to think about, or at least just acknowledge here when we're thinking about collecting rainwater off roofs, especially asphalt roofs, I think about, because that's made from an oil. But anyway, so I think about like when things fall off the roof, where do they go? How are we filtering through? So I want to suggest maybe putting a filter of some sort. Maybe it's a sand trap where you have like some type of basket that that holds sand, and basically sand filters out any water that goes through that basket. Or maybe it's just simply like some landscaping fabric that's pretty like thick, and you have that over your 55-gallon barrel where water gets filtered using that landscape fabric. But I think that's really important. Safety is always number one. So you want to secure these so they don't fall on anyone, but also so they don't get lifted or vandalized or taken. So security is a big thing. I think that's some of the important pieces that I wanted to just kind of mention. So I'm seeing a lot of questions about food. I really created a buzz on that, and I would love to talk about it. So yeah, so anyone can kind of grow down here. This is new, so I'm excited that there's so much energy about this. This is an open space. The Foodway is all about open source, not really putting up fencing, collaborating. We've started seed, so I've been working with Concrete Friends and with some other stakeholders who have been active in the park and just starting basic seedlings. As y'all have known, it's gotten pretty cold, so things won't be coming up for a little bit, but we've also been starting things indoors. So we've been having a series of seed starting events, and I encourage you all to start some seedlings maybe indoors during this time and transplanting them when things get warmer. So we're going to be having definitely separate conversations about how to gather people. I'm working with some folks who are associated with other cooperative groups in the city. So stay tuned. If you're interested and you want to talk more, leave a mention or email me at foodway@bronxriver.org. But any other, I guess I just want to kind of like round out our conversation about water-wise gardening before I head out for the day. But we talked about site selection. We want to think about where water flow is going. We want to think about plant selection. So we talked a lot about native plants, perennial plants, what those mean. And then we also want to think about water source. So we talked about how do we harvest water, redirecting water through either piping. We talked about stuff that's sub-irrigated. We talked about roof with rain barrels. And I think you can also just think about alternative material. I think that's a big thing. Just take like a garbage bin, think about what you have. What else did we talk about? At the end, I do want to talk about what vegetables are drought tolerant and like what edibles you can be growing that are drought tolerant. I think the big things during this time of year, while it's cool, are greens. Those are really hardy, really pretty resilient, don't need that much water. Peas and beans are really great ones. They're pretty hardy and resilient. They also don't need fertilizer because they create their own nitrogen, which is super amazing. I also think about quick crops, so things like beets, things like microgreens. If you take sunflower seeds and you soak them and those grow, they'll turn into little sprouts and you can eat those, and those are packed with nutrients. So those are like some pretty drought tolerant or really easy, quick crops to get nutrients with minimal water, right? Water-wise gardening. I saw a question about not having a gutter. What if you don't have access to a gutter? Can you just put a barrel out on its own? I would say that, but mosquitoes are going to be a big thing. So with the rain gutter system, think about how you're going to keep mosquitoes out. Thanks, Albert, for the congrats. I really appreciate all the support from everyone. As you know, I had a predecessor, Claire, who was doing a lot of work here, and so it's nice to be able to build off of what she had created. Peas and beans typically don't winter over here just because our winters have been tough, but maybe this past winter they could have because we didn't have many freezing nights. There are definitely certain varieties that will winter over. Also beans are easy. They're a fast reward. So I think before I head out, I would like to just give people a quick announcement. I know some of you have been following us on Instagram and some of our other social media pages like Facebook. We have a contest going on, our Eco-Conscious contest, and we are soliciting folks to send us what they're up to during this time indoors, whether it's seed starting or perhaps it's creating art that is eco-oriented. just share what you're up to. We would love to hear. You can hashtag us. You can find all these details on our social media pages, or you can email education@bronxriver.org and speak with Amber. She has been kind of behind the scenes orienting us and pulling all this together for this whole week. Stay tuned the rest of this week for more stories and more Instagram posts and social media posts of all sorts right here on the Bronx River pages. And if you want to know more about water-wise gardening tips, you can head over to bronxriver.org/foodway, where I've posted some of my tips and some resources from our own community members, including Grow NYC and some other partners. But I think that's it for me today. Those are a lot of my water-wise gardening tips. If you have any questions, like I said, reach out, don't be a stranger, and always stay safe during this time. Take care of one another and be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, take care, y'all.